Shields up, Ironbreakers, and welcome back to Monster Hunter. So a couple of days ago, I put a poll up on Twitter where I asked people to vote as to whether they preferred the random decoration system that was used in Monster Hunter World or the random charms that were used in Monster Hunter Rise. And to say that the community response to this particular subject was passionate is putting things very lightly. Now, following up on this poll, I also made one on the YouTube side of things because I wanted to get as many opinions as possible, and my audience on YouTube is naturally much larger than the audience that I have on Twitter. Now, some of you might be wondering, but Rurikhan, why tackle this specific topic at this point in time? And the main reasoning behind it is because during the Tokyo Game Show presentation, we got to see some UI elements that showed random decorations as a reward for hunting certain monsters that were on the field. This is one of the things that leads me to believe that this game is going to lean much more towards random decorations, kind of like what we had in Monster Hunter World, than necessarily random charms, but that's not to say that we can't just straight up have both and have random everything, which would be not what the community would want if I am going to be judging from the answers that I've seen in both polls that I've conducted. As a matter of fact, as a community, one of the things that I can definitely assure you is that a large majority of people don't want any kind of RNG, because people might be wondering, well, why don't people want this system or that system? And the main reason why people would want, say, RNG charms is not necessarily because they want charms to be random. It's more so because with RNG charms, you get to actually craft the decorations. So the reality is, no matter what system people choose, they're going to be choosing based on which system they believe is going to have the least amount of RNG, because we want things to be more deterministic. And I have a lot to say about that topic, but before we begin, I should mention that 2 years ago I ran this same poll. And back then, the results ended up being, out of 12,000 votes, overwhelming majority of people were in favor of RNG charms, which was what we were playing at the time, which was Monster Hunter Rise. We were talking about 78% of people voted RNG charms against 22% of people that voted RNG decorations. And I have to say, back then, I was on the side of RNG charms. However, ever since I made my return to World and I saw some of the improvements that they've made, which I had seen back in the day, but basically the way in which I played the game for the very first time, I had to deal with all of the downsides of RNG decorations without really that many of the upsides. But since then, it is important to mention that the system has evolved significantly. And, you know, one of the main complaints that people had about RNG decorations, which is something that I've even seen expressed in the recent poll that I conducted on Twitter, was, oh man, I can't wait to play another 1,000 hours without having a shield decoration. Or, oh, I can't wait to play for 2,000 hours without getting my Bow Charge Plus decoration. And it is interesting because in the latest iteration of Iceborne, these are actually problems that have been solved, because you can basically just meld these two decorations. And from my interpretation, that means that Capcom has understood the limitations of a system like RNG decos when people weren't able to get some very specific decos that they needed for their builds. Like, for instance, if you are playing Bow, you most definitely are going to need that Bow Charge Plus. If you are playing Gun Lance or maybe even Charge Blade, you're most definitely going to need that Capacity Boost decoration. And if you are playing Lance and even Gun Lance or other blocking weapons, you are most definitely going to need Guard Up. These are things that I believe Capcom has understood, which is why in the latest patch of Iceborne, those decorations are now meldable. And if I'm going to assume that Monster Hunter Wilds is going to use RNG decorations, I'm also going to go ahead and say it is most likely that they're going to keep things the same way that they had in the latest iteration of the decoration system, wherein some of these key decorations are likely going to be meldable. But again, this could just be wishful thinking. Now, before we dive in, it is important to mention that I don't believe that there are any wrong answers to this particular topic. I kind of feel like this is mostly a personal preference type of thing, and this is going to change based on your own personal expectations as well as your own playstyle. Some people will prefer the easy access to craftable decorations, but it also means that they're going to have a tougher time getting like a perfect charm, whereas some people will prefer the easier access to craftable charms, and they might just like like the whole thing about, oh, I just do a quest and I get the rewards at the end of the quest. I don't have to get involved with the whole melding side of things. Even though there is melding of decorations, a lot of them you just get by doing quests. So I can see both sides of this particular argument, and again, even though right now I stand firmly on the side of RNG decorations, I can see why people would prefer the other one. And like I also said, I think the most important part is that what people really want is the least amount of RNG possible, and based on their own personal experiences that they might have had, like maybe they were lucky with the RNG decorations, or maybe they were lucky with the random charms that they got in Monster Hunter Rise. Either way, people are going to have a personal preference, and I think that at the end of things, what really matters is how you feel, and not necessarily, oh, this system is objectively better than this other system. These are all just opinions, is what I'm getting at. So I kind of just wish that people don't attack each other over this. Like, let's talk about it, but let's not get nasty about it, if I can say that. The reality is that at the end of the day, one of my favorite things about Monster Hunter is being able to target the thing that I'm searching. This is an example that I always bring up whenever I'm talking about RNG in video games, and that is that, hey, you want to craft the big fire sword, go hunt Rathalos, who is the big fire dragon, and then you're going to be able to craft the big fire sword. Sometimes you might want to hunt a different monster because, you know, depending on which entry of Monster Hunter you're playing on, there's going to be different monsters going to have stronger weapons, but you get the gist. The idea is, hey, you want some evasion skills, you want to be fighting Nargacuga so that you can craft his armor, that his armor is probably going to have evasion skills. You want some blast skills, you want to go fight Brachydios or Basilgoose because their armor is likely going to have blast skills. Or in the case of Basilgoose, also going to have earplugs, which tends to be a skill that Basilgoose has. So I love targeted farming, and I think that most people really appreciate targeted farming. However, Monster Hunter World had actually quite a few problems outside of the RNG decorations, and that is when Kolth to Roth was introduced. I feel like Kolth to Roth is definitely one of those situations where Capcom took things a little bit too far in terms of RNG, because basically you're going to be getting random weapons, and getting random weapons is not something that feels particularly good. They did it a little bit better on the Safi'jiiva Siege, because at least with the Safi'jiiva Siege, whatever weapon you had equipped when you go to collect the rewards for completing the siege, that is going to influence which weapons you get. And as a matter of fact, I think that so long as you have your main weapon equipped, you're always going to get at the very least one new well, not necessarily one new weapon, but at least one weapon of the weapon type that you have equipped, so you can kind of influence it a little bit better. And the system with which you upgrade those weapons then become better is also a little bit better, but it's still very, very RNG. So Kolth to Roth and Safi'jiiva in terms of rewards are actually things that I didn't like that much. Now, the siege itself I thought was actually really fun. I enjoyed killing Kolth to Roth a couple of times. I did not enjoy killing Kolth to Roth every single minute that I had of free time for 2 straight weeks, hoping to get my shelling level 4 gun lance. That was actually pretty miserable. But the siege itself was fun the first couple of times I did it. And with Safi, I kind of feel like the siege was fun pretty much every time I did it. But I did have to do the siege much more often than I actually was required to. So I also got a little bit burned out on that. But I was also helping people get, like, you know, the weapons that they were looking for and all that stuff. So it was all good in the end. But I definitely don't want to see RNG weapons anymore. I want to see the main weapons coming out of the weapon tree that we have in the game, as opposed to what we had in World, which almost felt like we were playing Diablo in some of the endgame. It's like, oh, did you get this specific weapon from the RNG loot pool? Okay, cool, then you have a really powerful weapon. Oh, you didn't get the weapon? Well, that sucks, because you can't target it, and good luck, right? And I kind of feel like this is where the community is. This is one of the biggest drawing points of Monster Hunter, which, even though it always had certain degrees of RNG, that RNG has been variable over the years, and one of the main draws is always like targeted. You're able to target the loot that you want. So, you know, that's the way that I feel. Now, one of the things is, like I've mentioned previously, a lot of people will want to craft decorations because that is their way of, you know, not just their way, that is the preferred way of just getting things, crafting, targeting things. The problem with RNG decorations is that the variation on RNG charms gets a little bit too extreme, and at the same time, melding those charms is extremely boring, and getting the results of those melds can actually take quite a bit of time once you run out of whatever was the thing that gave you the charms immediately, which was also only introduced much later into the game's life cycle. But naturally, if we are comparing these systems with the RNG decos at the end of Iceborne, we need to be comparing the charm grind at the end of Sunbreak, because that's just what makes sense. Now, a lot of people are quick to point out that RNG Charms is not something new. As a matter of fact, RNG Decorations is kind of like the new kid on the block, which they are absolutely correct, because RNG Charms used to be the norm in the older generation of Monster Hunter games. So in a way, we've always had RNG Charms. But the thing that people don't like to talk about is that back then, the old way that skills used to work was vastly different. The whole thing where you had to stack up the 10 points of one skill in order to actually get that skill to have any effect. So if you have, for instance, 9 points in attack boost, that meant absolutely nothing. You needed to get the 10 to get attack boost S, and then you needed to get it up to 15 to get attack boost M, and I believe it needed to get it up to 20 to get attack boost L. So getting skills in the older games was much more complicated than it is now. And in my opinion, it was actually a really fun system. Now, naturally, it is not necessarily a modern system, and a lot of people are not going to like it. Another thing that most people don't like to bring up is the fact that in the old games, you also had negative skills, which is something that after a poll that I did in a recent live stream, I already know that a majority of you guys most definitely do not want negative skills to be coming back. So keep that in mind whenever you are quick to bring up the topic, like, well, we always had RNG charms. And it's like, yes, and skills were also vastly different, and we also always had negative skills during those days as well. So keep these things in your mind as you are arguing this. And by the way, in my opinion, I love the way that the old games did it, and I feel like build crafting was much more meaningful than it was during Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Now, I understand that for a lot of people, you guys are like, no, give me the Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak experience because builds were so diverse, I got to put so many skills, but it's like the reality is most of your skills, and we all know it, were like attack boost 7, crit eye 7, weakness exploit 3, critical boost 3, so on and so forth. The usual culprits, agitator 5, the usual stuff, right? And then you would put like maybe 1 or 2 flavor skills because Curious Crafting just enabled so much shenanigans in that game that it was absolutely insane. Curious Crafting, by the way, is something that I hope that I never see again in my whole lifetime, because good lord, that system actually made me the press. At the end of every stream, I would usually save the Curious Crafting to the end of the stream because I knew that after I was done doing Curious Crafting, the last thing that I wanted to go do was to play the game anymore. I would need a break after a session of Curious Crafting to wash away my depression. Now, earlier in this video, I pointed out that you can now meld certain specific decorations in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, but a lot of people will also be quick to point out that in the final update of Sunbreak, you're also able to target specific skills for your charm melding. However, it is also important to mention that the ritual that allows you to select those skills is not the ritual that gives you access to the best possible skills. So your best possible rolls, your god rolls, are still going to be completely random, and they're not going to be targeted. So just keep that in mind whenever you want to bring up, oh, but we can target skills in Sunbreak as well. Yes, but at that point you are settling for a charm that is not as good. So beyond Guard Up Deco and Bow Charge Plus Deco, which are decorations that I've already addressed earlier in the video and that are now meldable in the final version of Iceborne, another decoration that is usually brought up whenever people are arguing in favor of RNG charms is the Attack Plus 4 Deco. They say that they've played a certain amount of thousands of hours, they never got an Attack Plus 4 Deco, which I absolutely believe because the chances of you getting an Attack Plus 4 Deco are exceedingly rare. As a matter of fact, I looked it up on Kiriniku and apparently it is 0.27%. That is an exceedingly low chance of ever getting this decoration. However, I would also argue if you are arguing in favor of getting an Attack Plus 4 Deco, we also have to address the fact that in order for you to get an Attack Plus 4 Deco in Sunbreak, you need to grind the anomaly system up to rank 241. which for those of you that don't remember, that's going to take you quite a while, despite the fact that they've greatly improved the EXP grinding of anomalies all the way up to 220. Once you hit that 220, it's like hitting a wall at high speed. You're going to hit that wall, and from that moment onwards, the grind is going to be an absolute slog that is going to take you a very long time to also get the materials for an attack +4. But if we're talking about the best of the best when it comes to decorations in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, I only feel that it is fair to compare it to the best of the best when it comes to charms in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Now, in this particular example, I'm not even going to go for the best of the best, even though I should, but I feel like the chances are just going to be so astronomical that they're just going to be lost on people. Now, I would like to get some feedback on this from people that have a better understanding of percentages than I do, because look, math is not necessarily my strong suit, but I definitely understand how percentages work, or at least I would like to believe so. So if we take a look here off to the side, there's a couple of notes on this spreadsheet that I found from user Detail Nor, which compiled all of the information possible on Sunbreak charms that we can get, and it has the percentages here. So it says here the odds of getting a skill that is marked level S, A, B, or C are going to be respectively 15%, 32%, 38%, or 15%. So I'm going to grab, I'm not even going to grab the S skills, which are going to be very punishing if I was to grab one of those. I'm just going to grab 2 A skills, and I'm also not even going to go for the best of the best when it comes to slots, because the odds of getting the best of the best slots are going to be 2%. We're actually going to be going for 5%, which is the second best. So we're taking the second best skills, and I'm going to be choosing 2 from those, and then we're going to be choosing from the second best of slot combinations, and we're going to be choosing from those in order to go ahead and see what are the chances of us getting that specific charm. I should also point out that in the beginning of Monster Hunter Rise, this user made a calculation of what it would take to get certain skills on a charm. So for instance, in Monster Hunter Rise, if you wanted to get the best possible charm with offensive combinations, people were saying, oh, it's going to be like Critical Boost 2 with Weakness Exploit 2, and the slot combination is going to be 3-1-1. The probability of that is 1 out of 416 billion. Good luck. Then they say that an easier combination to get back then used to be Critical Boost 2 plus Weakness Exploit 2 plus 1 Tier 2 slot. The probability of that was 1 out of 1.6 billion. And then they say that a more human attainable skill would be Weakness Exploit 2 plus a Tier 2 slot, and that was about 1 out of 2,724, which is obviously much more achievable. Now, it's important to say that this is what it was in the beginning of Rise, or 2.0 Rise. That's not what it is right now. So, taking the percentages that are presented here, I opened up a percentage calculator because we're going to need to do successive percentages, because you need to calculate the percentage. Okay, what's the percentage chance of me getting this skill? Okay, then what's the percentage chance of me getting this skill at, you know, the level that I want? And then what is the percentage chance after these two things happening of us getting the next skill that I want? Because that's kind of like how calculating these percentages is going to work. So for this example, we're going to be looking for Frostcraft +3, which apparently is possible to roll, and Weakness Exploit 2. And then, like I said, with just whatever slots we would get of the second best slots, which would either be 1 tier 4 and 1-1, 1 tier 3, 1 tier 2 and 1-1, or 2 tier 3s and nothing else. That's like the second best slot rolls that you can have. And I'm not even going to choose a specific one. I'm just going to say whatever I get from that, I would be happy with. Okay? So, first things first. On when it comes to the Frostcraft, you're already looking at 32% chances of getting Frostcraft. That's not so bad. But then when the Frostcraft rolls, it can either roll Frostcraft 1, 2, or 3. And if it can roll 1, 2, or 3, that means that you're looking at a 33% chance of rolling level 3, which is what I said. I wanted Frostcraft 3, Weakness Exploit 2. So you're looking at a 33%, and this is me assuming that the system is weighted equally after you roll the skill, which is a big assumption, because it might not. I would imagine that the system would actually be harder to get a level 3 roll on Frostcraft than it is to get, say, a level 2 roll on Frostcraft. But let's just assume that it is the same, so it is going to be a 32% chance followed by a 33% chance of getting that thing at level 3, which would then be followed by another 32% chance of getting Weakness Exploit, and then it would be followed by a 50% chance because Weakness Exploit can roll 1 or 2 as a secondary skill, so that's only another 50%, again, assuming that the chances of you getting 1 or 2 are equal, which they might not be, and I don't really have that many details in regards to how those skills roll. Then we need to get a 5% chance of getting the second best slot characteristics. And keep in mind, all of these calculations are to get things that I would consider to be second best. So in this calculator, I'm going to put a decrease of 68% in the first chance because that is what's going to give us the 32%. Then a decrease in 66, which that is going to be giving us that 33% chance. And then a decrease in 68, which is for the second 32% chance skill. And then another decrease in 50, which is the chance of us rolling 1 or 2. And then a decrease of 95%, which is the 5% of us getting potentially the the slots that we wanted. That gives us 0.087% chance of getting that charm. And to be honest, I kind of feel like the calculations are wrong because I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be an even smaller number than that. But maybe these last charm rituals were actually way better than I remember. Regardless of that, it is more likely that you will get 3 attack 4 decorations before you actually get the charm that you want. And this is just statistically speaking. But I want you to keep one thing in mind. I'm not trying to change your mind with this. I'm just saying that when people are arguing, these are the statistics that you are arguing against. Your feelings over the matter are still going to be what really matters, whether you like to get decorations as rewards at the end of your quests, or whether you like to get, the ability to specifically target the decorations that you want to go after and craft those. These are going to be things that are going to weigh way more heavily on you than necessarily the statistics, not to mention, these are take them with a grain of salt, because the only one I'm pretty sure is correct is that attack plus 4 decos are 0.27% chance, because that data is actually on Kiraniku, and this is from, a community spreadsheet that I have no idea exactly how this even works. Statistically speaking, if you're the type of person that likes to have that completionist mindset and you want to actually try and see if you can finish builds, I would argue that RNG Decorations is better for that. But if you're somebody that you just want to target your decorations and whatever charm you get you don't really care that much about, obviously you're going to prefer RNG charms. And like I said, different players are going to feel differently about this, and there really isn't a right answer when it comes to this stuff. So now that I've given you as much context as possible into the topic, let's go ahead and take a look at the poll results. So we're starting things off with Twitter here, where we received 7,077 votes, and I'm just emphasizing that because usually I don't get that many votes on Twitter, and getting 7,000 people to actually vote on this is quite humbling. Thank you very much for taking the time to vote on this topic. But as you guys can see, RNG Charms edges out ahead at 50.6%. RNG Decorations very closely behind at 49.4%. So this is almost a 50-50 with a slight advantage towards RNG Charms, which definitely shows that the community is divided on this issue. Now let's take a look at the YouTube side of things, where we can see that it is a little bit different, but not really by that much. We have 16,000 votes on here, and RNG Decorations is winning at 56% versus 44%. Which again is just very divided. And the interesting thing about looking at these results is where we were 2 years ago, where an overwhelming amount of people with 12,000 votes were in favor of RNG Charms. So what this tells me is that over time, as people came back to World, because there was the Return to World campaign, people actually started changing their minds on RNG Charms. Probably also because of the evolution of Charms, the way in which they did it in Sunbreak, where charms basically started losing value every other title update, whereas decorations didn't really lose that much value. So I kind of feel like that might have been a part of people also changing their minds on the topic. But either way, it was just a fascinating thing to look at, and thank you very much to everybody who participated. Now finally, Tokyo Game Show gameplay does seem to point more towards RNG decorations, and I've seen a lot of people express desperation that this is like, oh, that was the worst part of Monster Hunter World, I can't believe they would bring that stupid system back. And I understand your feeling, but I think that this time it's not going to be quite as RNG heavy as it used to be, because like I mentioned, in Monster Hunter World, at the end of Iceport, they realized there's some decorations that we just can't take away from players because they're too important for certain builds. Things like shield decoration, bow charge plus, magazine, these are all things that they allowed us to meld. I don't think that they're going to cut those things off. There's probably going to be a point in the game where we will be able to craft those. I wouldn't imagine that we can craft them at the very beginning, but probably later into the game I would imagine that they will let us just meld those or craft them or target them in some way, because it feels like they've realized that needed to be a thing. And also, there is a different system that is happening in Monster Hunter Wilds, in which we have the decorations that have the sword symbol, which I believe those are going to be offensive decorations that we're going to be placing on our weapons. And then there's the blue decorations that are just utility decorations. So even just splitting up decorations, the potential skills that we're going to be getting down the middle, and us actually being able to target which one we want. It's like, you want an offensive decoration or do you want a utility decoration? And you can go look at the quest and you see, okay, this monster is going to give me like 2 utility decorations and 3 offensive ones. I want to do this quest because I want to get offensive decorations, right? The ability for us to be able to target it that way is already a huge improvement to the way that it worked in Monster Hunter World. It's also important to mention that the developers have confirmed through interviews and stuff that has happened since Tokyo Game Show that there is going to be a major overhaul in the Wilds skill system. So you can expect skills to work differently, potentially. My prediction is that we're going to have less skills, but this is just speculation at this point. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about this because a lot of people felt that I was trying to push a narrative down their spine. And if you actually look to my first video that I've made on this, where I was on the RNG charm side of things, even there I say, look, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. The thing is, I just like talking about Monster Hunter. That's one of my favorite things. Like, look, I made a whole podcast to talk about Monster Hunter with Gaijin Hunter. I love talking about the game. It's my favorite game. I just want to talk about stuff and get the community's opinion on it, and I really wish people wouldn't get so defensive on the system that they prefer. Because whenever people would come at me saying like, oh, I like my system better because of this, I would reply, okay, I like my system better because of this. Because I assumed we wanted to have this conversation, but it seems like a lot of people's like, no, you're wrong, you're just wrong, your system is wrong and my system is right. And I was like, okay, I guess. And people started getting at each other's throats. And it's like, relax, guys. I'm going to play the game no matter what. Hell, even if it's RNG charms, if it's RNG everything, I'm still going to play the game. I'm probably going to complain a lot about it, though, but I'm still going to play the game because Monster Hunter is my favorite franchise. But anyway, that's going to be it for now. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, bell notification icon, all that jazz, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.